Hey guys, Frosty Knives here, back with another video. And I wanted to talk about a topic that we're not really going to be covering when I do my Star Wars Expanded Universe read and review books. And it is a topic that a lot of people have sort of been asking about. And I think it's a topic that it's important enough to get a little bit of a backstory on and a little bit of a foundation on. And that is the history of the Sith and the rule of two, and where it came from, and how it was created, and why it was created. And all of that took place in the Old Republic, and because I'm not going to be reviewing the Old Republic, we won't go over those books, but I think it's important enough that people have a basic understanding of a little bit of Sith history, and a little bit of a reasoning of why and how this rule came to be, and how the Sith, as we know it in the movies, came to be. So let's talk about it. So 1,000 years ago, 1,000 years prior to the events of the Phantom Menace, there was the Old Republic. Right, as in the Phantom Menace, you hear them talk about how the Jedi have ruled the galaxy for 1,000 years. They were the guardians of peace, and they had eliminated the Sith, and they were just the guardians of the Force and the guardians of the universe. Well, 1,000 years prior to the Phantom Menace, there were a lot of Jedi. There were also a lot of Sith. So the Jedi and the Sith numbered in the hundreds. And they each had their own code. The Jedi had their own code. The Sith had their own code. They had their own temples. They had their own doctrines. They had their own crystals and holocrons and technology, and they had their own ways. And the Jedi mainly used the Force for peacekeeping and meditation and gaining knowledge and healing and that sort of thing. And the Sith mainly used the Force for power. To get power, to maintain power, to increase your power. They were all about being the most powerful Force users in the universe, because they wanted to control everything. They wanted to run the galaxy. They wanted to wipe the Jedi out of existence, and they wanted to be the ones who were running the show. So, because they were coming from a place of power, Jedi were coming from a place of defense, as you can imagine, there were a lot of battles. There were a lot of battles, then there were a lot of wars, and there was a lot of death, and a lot of Jedi died, and a lot of Sith died, and that's what was going on quite frequently in the Old Republic. The two forces vying for power, vying to be the ones that were masters of the Force and that were going to rule the galaxy. So the Sith, in addition to being very powerful and very powerful dark side users and just doing everything for their own personal benefit because they wanted to be in charge, they were also very greedy. They were extremely, extremely greedy. So greed and power and the acquisition of power is what drove them. So not only were the Sith fighting the Jedi, but the Sith were also fighting each other. There was a lot of internecine warfare within the Sith themselves. So the Jedi were fighting the Sith were fighting the Sith were fighting the Jedi. They weren't very organized. They were all vying to be the one who was in charge. So because of that, the Jedi saw this as an opportunity. Because the Sith were fighting amongst themselves, they weren't cohesive, and they were battling each other, they saw that as an opportunity to eliminate the Sith, to wipe them out of existence. So they attempted to do that. They fought a battle, they fought a war, and there was a major culling, and many, many Sith died. It decimated the Sith Order. It just decimated them. Mostly because they were so wrapped up in their own things. They weren't working together that the Jedi were able to overwhelm them and decimate them. And out of that, what was left after that culling, what was left of the Sith Order, rose one Dark Lord, one Sith, one dark side Force user. And that was Darth Bane. And Darth Bane was very powerful. Darth Bane was also very smart. And he realized, not the rest of the Sith didn't realize it, but he realized that they weren't going to survive if they continued to do what they were doing. If they were to continue with the status quo, the Sith weren't going to survive. So there needed to be a restructuring. There needed to be a reordering of the Sith Order. Something needed to be done, because if the Jedi didn't wipe them out, they were going to wipe themselves out. So Darth Bane did a couple of things. One of the things that he did was he wiped out the rest of the Sith. He wiped out the rest of the old order Sith and said, that way doesn't work anymore. We're going to create a new way. I'm going to create a new way for the Sith to exist, for the order to survive. So he eliminated the rest of the Sith, and then he created the rule of two. He said there should not be hundreds of Sith out there. That way didn't work. That wasn't good. So we're going to create a new rule. The rule of two. At any given time, there should only ever be two Sith. One master, one apprentice. And that would be one to hold the power, the master. So one Sith to hold the power, and the other one to crave the power. And so the idea was that he was going to have two Sith, and they were going to sort of slide into the background. They were going to go into the shadows. They were going to start waging shadow war. They were going to regroup, cull themselves down, learn everything that they can about the Force, plumb all the secrets of the dark side, and they were going to strike from the shadows, because that's what Darth Bane thought was going to help. And the Jedi caught wind of that. They caught wind that that's what Darth Bane was doing, that he was restructuring and he was creating this. So they went after him. And at this point, Darth Bane had taken an apprentice. So at this point, there were only two Sith. There was Bane and there was his apprentice. And the Jedi went after them, and Darth Bane was killed. Now, history is a little bit murky on how he was killed and by whom was he killed. The Jedi will tell you that they killed Darth Bane, and they thought that he was the last of the Sith. So they thought that once they eliminated Bane, they have eliminated all of the Sith, and they're gone from the galaxy. And that's why they sort of rested on their laurels when we finally see them in The Phantom Menace. They said, the Sith are gone. We've eliminated them. They haven't been Sith in 1,000 years. I don't know what you're talking about. They killed the last of them way back when. So the Jedi think that they killed Darth Bane. Other reports say that his apprentice killed Darth Bane. But either way, Bane was murdered, and then the Sith Order went into the shadows. But there was still the apprentice. There was still the apprentice carrying on the rule of two. And they went into hiding. They went into the background. They went into the shadows, and they bided their time. And Darth Bane had two end goals for creating for restructuring the Sith Order and for creating the rule of two. One, he wanted revenge on the Jedi. He wanted to get revenge for the Jedi nearly wiping out the Sith. So his overall game was revenge. But his other game was to plumb the depths of the dark side and find out every single thing you could possibly do, all of the abilities, learn everything you could possibly learn, and become the most powerful Sith and dark side user in the galaxy. So Darth Bane was playing the long con. He knew that this was going to take a while. This was going to take generations. This was the long con. And that's what he was in for. He was in for that long game. And that's what they did. Now, when you think about it, the rule of two is actually a perfect rule because it forces the person, the apprentice, to become more powerful than the master. So if Darth Bane is the most powerful Sith Lord there is, in order for the apprentice to beat him, they had to become more powerful than Bane and learn everything that Bane knew and then become more powerful than him to take him out. So they would become more powerful than they would take an apprentice. And then that apprentice would learn everything and become more powerful than that master. And it would go on and it would go on and it would go on. So theoretically, the last Sith would be the most powerful Sith in a chain going down generations, right? Because if you're always learning, you're always becoming more powerful, you're always killing your master, you're passing on your knowledge forcefully, they're taking the power from you, then the idea is you're building the perfect Sith. You're building the most powerful Sith you can. So that chain went on from Darth Bane to his apprentice, and it went on and on, and it went on all the way through the generations until we get to Darth Plagueis, who was Palpatine's master. They were the last two, right? So by Plagueis' time, Plagueis had gotten extremely powerful, and we'll get to that first book where we learn a little bit about this, but Plagueis became really powerful, and he had learned a lot of things about the dark side. And two of the things that he was really sort of known for was, it was very highly insinuated that he learned how to use the Force to create life. Anakin. And not only did they want power, but they also wanted immortality. So they wanted to find a way to live forever. And that's what Plagueis was working on. He wanted to find a way to be immortal. And then, of course, as we all know, Palpatine learned everything that he could from Plagueis and then murdered him and became the last, really the last in the line of the Sith Lords, because that chain ended with Plagueis and Vader. So, and if you watch the movies and you really get into some of this into the expanded universe, you'll find out that Palpatine really was powerful. He was probably the most powerful Sith Lord that ever existed. So this idea, this rule of two, really did work because it ultimately created Palpatine. And what did Palpatine do? Well, he got himself into power. He destroyed the Jedi, wiped out the Order, created armies, destroyed the Republic, built an empire, and he ruled the galaxy. He built an empire that lasted 20 some odd years, and he fulfilled all of Darth Bane's objectives. Wiped out the Jedi, or most of them, took revenge on them, wiped them all out, built himself an empire, ruled the galaxy by fear, had his henchmen, had his apprentice, had Vader, had his tech, had his army, had his troopers, and just had the entire galaxy in a stranglehold. So, by those qualifications, Palpatine became the most powerful Sith Lord in the galaxy. So that is essentially what the rule of two is, and how it came about, and why it came about, and the ramifications of it. Now, as we all know, we all know what happened at the end of Jedi, and we can talk about whether or not Anakin was the chosen one or bringing balance to the Force. But I will say he was the one that that snapped the chain, right? It was him and Palpatine, and he wound up killing Palpatine, and instead of taking an apprentice or having an apprentice or passing it on, he died. So in essence, Vader broke the chain of the rule of two. It ended with Vader. It just, that way of life, that way of the Sith Order, that ended with him. So in that respect, he was, from a certain point of view, a chosen one because he did bring balance. He brought some type of balance back to the Force by ending Bane's way of Sith life. Now, that's not to say that you're never going to see any Sith in the expanded universe. You will, because the Sith not only was the Sith a religion, but the Sith was a culture. And it was a culture that spanned an entire galaxy. And it was a culture that had temples, and it was a culture that had doctrines and books and holocrons and technology spread out all over the galaxy. So there's always instances of Sith popping up, people finding Sith doctrines or Sith holocrons. So you'll see Sith through the expanded universe, but you've never seen the Sith on the level as it was with the Empire. The Sith really peaked with Palpatine. That was really their end game. And once Palpatine and Vader were gone, then it was just remnants of the Sith, the old religion, that was left. Remnants of their culture left that people stumbled over and found through the rest of the books. So guys, that was a video or an overview of the Rule of Two and where the Sith came from and why they were in hiding and why there were only two of them. So that's a little bit of background knowledge and information going into the expanded universe. You don't have to know, everything, all the nuance of Sith history or culture, but those are the broad strokes of those rules and where the Sith were and where they went and where they ended up. And we'll get into a lot of that as we get into the expanded universe, because we're going to start with Plagueis, and we're going to go through the Empire, and we're going to go past the Empire. We're going to find all kinds of nifty things. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that video, that little brief introduction and explanation of the Sith. It's a fascinating piece of Star Wars lore. It's very, very fascinating. And when we get into the expanded universe, we're going to explore that. We're going to explore the Sith. We're going to explore the ideology of the Sith. We're going to explore the ideology of the Force. We're going to explore the ideology of the Jedi, because there's a lot of philosophy in these books. And there's a lot of changes that happens in the Sith, in the Jedi, in the Force itself. We're going to talk about all of the different ideologies and the way different people view the Force, how they view the dark side and the light side, and how different people use the dark side and the light side. So it's a lot of philosophical stories and questions and debates that will happen as we start making our way through the expanded universe. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. I hope it was somewhat informational for you. And as always, if you like it, give it a thumbs up. Give it a subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your enemies, pass it around. And until next time, may the frost be with you.